everyone. Welcome to the episode. With me today is Adam, the developer of Demon's Tilt. Welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks, Mark.
So, for the listeners out there who really aren't familiar with the project, how would you describe Demon's Tilt as a game?
Sure. Yeah, Demon's Tilt is a game that's been in development by me, started in 2015. It's a video pinball game in a 2D style, so it's sprite-based. It's arcadey. It's got a kind of retro throwback vibe. So, if you're into pinball and pinball games, you might know like Zen Pinball or Pinball Arcade. And so this is kind of a callback to more like Epic Pinball and the games on TurboGrafx, the Crush series, Pokemon Pinball, some of the
Sonic Spinball,
yeah,
maybe?
exactly, yeah, and then yeah, NES Pinball. So yeah, it's sprite based. It's a very flat view, like a overhead view. So there's not really polygonal. Yeah, what else should I say? Oh, sorry. That's
That's
me.
fine,
That's
man.
me goofing.
So, as a pinball game, what aspects of this game do you think would appeal to the average shmup fan?
It's kind of in the marketing. We use bullet hell and we reference shmup and hack and slash as genres, and it's not just an aesthetic thing. Like the game has pink bullets and patterns that appear on the playfield, but there's the aesthetic part. There's the bosses are kind of referencing kind of bosses you'd see in a vertical shmup. But it's actually like the scoring is taken almost a lot of ideas are kind of loaned from Cave. So yeah, it's a lot of things about the scoring and the combo system and things like that that I think might appeal to a shmup fan even more than the kind of surface level, bullets on the playfield kind of thing. And I can go into as much detail as you want about either.
Well, I guess to start things off, I guess the crossover between pinball and shmups, I feel like even outside of adding shmup elements into a pinball game, I think there's actually a lot of shared history between the two genres of games. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a fair comparison. I think the communities, they both have a very dedicated community, and I think they've both had like like a silver and golden age, right? And they were, maybe shmup was like the premier genre in the arcade that kind of took a backseat to like beat 'em ups and then fighting games. And so with pinball too, you had something that had a silver and golden age in the arcade and then kind of faded back. But then the fan base is, extremely dedicated and they've kind of shaped the genre as it's gone forward and helped to, dictate its direction in a way outside of the mainstream and past its initial life, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, you have the resurgence in pinball now definitely caters to that very hardcore audience. I mean, it's growing in a way that it's trying to, and I'm talking about physical, by the way.
Yeah.
It's growing in a way that's appealing to both, but really they owe it to their kind of core consumer, and so everything is kind of tailored to the experience that they enjoy most about it. And I think you can say the same about the shmup genre for sure.
Yeah, and I'm far from being a expert in pinball. I mean, I have a friend who's actually really into pinball, and another friend who was, I guess, a world record holder on a certain pinball table. So I brushed my shoulders enough with pinball and played enough pinball to feel like, in my view, I almost see pinball as like the ancestor to shmups, right? The physical game of pinball kind of preceded shmups, where a lot of the gameplay elements that we love and enjoy in shmups you can find in pinball. There's score chasing, the reflexes, the strategy of figuring out scoring systems, the survival aspect too, right? Of just keeping your
Yeah,
ball in play, or if you're trying to play for score.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
there's
I think what you're saying is like the way that they're enjoyed, like the first impression it makes on you versus how it's enjoyed at a higher level is different. So so you have like the 1cc with shmups, and that's where people are telling you where it really opens up, like the game will start to open up where you start to care more about your run.
mhm.
And so with pinball, it's like newer players are mostly concerned with staying alive. And then until they kind of get a basic grasp of nudging the machine, they're not really that game hasn't opened up to them. They're mostly concentrated on staying alive, that they're not thinking about scoring opportunities, risk reward, that more competitive play. So yeah, I think definitely there's comparisons to be drawn between the two. And also I think the fan bases tend to, if you enjoy that kind of gaming where it's like score based and you're playing against yourself mostly,
Mm-hmm.
then you tend to gravitate towards, I think a lot of people like, it's like pinball, they like shmups, this is like generational too, but they'll be into like puzzle games like Puyo Puyo Tetris. And so their genres tend to be games with a lot of depth, like the rhythm games and stuff have a lot of mechanical depth to them. Mm.
Definitely. Well, I think too, just the arcade experience. Again, my history might be a little fuzzy here, but I'm pretty sure that pinball before shmups, before even video games, like had a certain type of arcade scene, right? Where you would go to play pinball, and then they started adding in video games into those arcades, right? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, it's accurate. I mean, it's definitely before, like their history is very, very long,
Yeah,
and so my experience, and I don't know about yours, but was growing up seeing pinball alongside the early '90s arcade scene, and then kind of seeing it slowly disappear, and then maybe enjoying it in just a different way, just because of the generational change, like where it was mostly all about video games at the time,
hmm,
that maybe you didn't appreciate it in like the same way that the the kind of previous gen did.
yeah. And just thinking back to my arcade experience, my childhood arcade. So I had two arcades, like a big one that I had to go out of town to go play, and that was like the big deal. And then I had a childhood arcade that was a local pizza shop, and the arcade was
Mm.
literally Caddyshack Pinball, Raiden 2, and Spy Hunter. So I'd literally play Raiden 2 and then play Caddyshack Pinball right after that. So
That's pretty great. Yeah, I think for us, we were like, the arcades were at a point where you could only really go on your birthday. Like they were kind of living and dying, and they weren't really a staple. And I mean, it was a staple for your birthday,
right,
but then it
yes.
would be like it was just Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2, and then let's see what else the arcade has to offer. And because you were young and like it wasn't really, it was actually having its golden age, right, with the Williams and the DMD stuff, like Twilight Zone and Adam's Family and stuff like that. So like actually the best games were coming out at the time, but it would be like an alternative to kind of how you were spending, your time there.
Getting back to you as a developer, I'm really interested to hear the story of how you personally started becoming an indie video game developer and what kind of sparked your interest.
Sure, I've been a freelancer for a while now, since 2010. I left my full time job to become a freelancer. So I had worked out of college, actually went to school for first graphic design, thought I was going to be doing advertising, and then ended up for my bachelor's choosing toy design, just kind of a strange major
Cool one.
or thing to get a degree in. Yeah. But I thought at the time, I was like, this is definitely the most interesting course that or program that the school offered. I went to FIT in New York. It was certainly the most interesting, so I thought I'd enjoy it the most. And so that's kind of where I went. And it's one that required the most like art skills and drawing skills, which I enjoy the most. And that ended up netting me an internship and eventually a job at Hasbro Inc., the toy company, yep, in 2006 or seven. And so I stayed there for about 4 years in their concept group. And so my day to day was really a lot of, yeah, coming up with ideas or looking at inventions that were coming in and, you know, concepting for all the brands that the company has. But mostly it was like communicating internally.
Hmm.
So communicating ideas between teams. So it's not really a lot of hands-on time with the product that actually goes out the door. That was really the role of somebody else, a product designer, toy designer, proper. Whereas I was more like a concept designer, which is a little different. Like the goals are different.
Yeah.
And so I decided to leave and do freelancing, and I decided to do illustration, but not knowing that. it's actually extremely cutthroat
Oh, yeah.
to do illustration. Well, I thought I was okay, but it turns out I wasn't that great actually. And I needed a lot of foundation work to get good enough to get illustration work. So yeah, I did a lot of various, graphic design stuff as a freelancer at first while I was brushing up on illustration. Um, and so this was 2010-ish.
Hmm.
This is a long story, by the way. This is a
Well,
long
I
way
think
to get to.
everyone, especially in the shmup community, has a deep interest in indie development and indie developers. So people
Sure.
want to hear this for sure.
Okay, yeah, so I'll get into all of it then. Yeah, so the kind of illustration I want to do is like sci-fi fantasy stuff. And you just needed to be at a certain level to get that kind of work. So I just practiced a lot. And then I think after like 2 years is when I started getting those jobs. And the first one I did was like doing illustrations and designs for like a fantasy miniature game,
Hmm.
like a samurai miniature game. And I did like all the creatures. I did like 40 of them for not so much money, but it didn't matter because it was really fun. And then I started finally getting illustration gigs proper with like NC Soft. Worked on like a Blade and Soul mobile card thing, which was very difficult. And
I
that,
bet.
and I worked for Applebot, which was another. There was like a lot of Japanese and Korean card games that were just blowing up on the App Store at the time, and so it was like perfect because everyone needed all of this art, so they were willing to take chances on literally anybody who sent stuff in.
That's cool.
So I was able to get work and like get paid to practice and learn on the job. And I guess around that time to start on the indie game stuff, there was I basically heard a podcast. I'm not going to say the guy who it was, but there was a game that I had seen on Kickstarter, and I practically begged to be a part of it through an email.
Yeah.
And so he gave me a shot doing like concept art for an indie game, and he himself is an incredible designer with an incredible vision for this project. It was basically his solo project. And I just remember like almost within 72 hours, like being asked that actually this is a very bad idea. Like our skill sets are complementary and like it's not gonna work, nothing about this can work. And I like immediately recognized it's true, but during that time he had showed me Unity and I was like, okay, this is crazy. Like this engine like that you can just within a day hit build and like see like 3D cubes like floating around was just like mind blowing as an artist,
Sure. Yeah.
someone who loves design because I had tried a lot. Like I had tried to mod Quake 3, I had tried building maps in Half-Life Source. I used to mess with RPG Maker a lot in like high school. And so it was really hard to ever get any traction. I tried doing the Flash stuff, but there was never like it almost became hard to like I don't know follow a community or and then you had this thing Unity where basically very strong development community already, a lot of stuff on the asset store that can get you started right away. So immediately I could just do prototyping. So yeah, after that project, I guess I downloaded it, and that was probably when I met my friend Ralph, who's helping me finish Demon's Tilt and publish it. And we worked on a little AR prototype because he's also interested in AR and VR development. So Ralph done a lot of work in Unity, and so I was helping him develop like a physical component to an AR prototype on a project he was calling Ether Drift. And so I really just designed characters and I linked him up with another toy guy who could help him sculpt a figure for this little project. And he ended up getting it casted up and printed and a small run of models produced. And so we kind of met there and he was telling me about, getting into Unity via something called Playmaker, which is a visual scripting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if you're like me and you have a lot of trouble with syntax and actually learning programming, this was like the perfect way to get up and running for me
Sure.
because like I knew what games should feel like just from playing them, but I just had no means to like chip away at that vision.
Hmm.
And so using this visual scripting, I was able to like almost like brute force the engine to match like a kind of vision that I had for whatever. Like I think let me think the first things I worked on. There were a lot of just like little prototypes and I
Hmm.
did game jams. So if you know game jams are just like these a couple of days
Yeah.
dedicated and then you just knock something out. So I did 7-day FPS in 2014 with a buddy of mine, Dan. We've been friends forever. he's a developer for iOS, and I remember he was just like, "Wow, this engine just makes such a good impression on me," which is very rare for a development environment to kind of wow you out the gate and be that friendly. And so, yeah, he lives in iOS land doing development, not in games, and I kind of just stayed with it. And like after the game jam was over, I kept like polishing the thing we did,
Nice.
even though we were never going to release it. And then after that, I started developing like I'm trying to remember when I started a shmup because I started a shmup, and if you Google, you could probably find my post on the shmup forums. But basically, elements from that ended up becoming Demon's Tilt, and I think I also wanted to make a video pinball game because the game that this is really inspired by is a game called Devil's Crush.
Yes.
I had always known that I wanted to like I don't know why, but I really wanted to make some kind of spiritual tribute to this game. And I'm not sure what it was. Like that game just had a magnetic quality to me. Like even in ROM form, like after I had played the like ROM and then like I don't remember when, but I kind of became mini obsessive about it. And like I was planning a trip to Tokyo, and I made it like my mission to buy a physical PC engine and a physical copy, and I was like playing it in the hotel room.
Nice.
And actually, this is like maybe the weird genesis of Demon's Tilt, but on the same trip, that's when I found like a Mushi Himi Sama Futari, like the cave shmup in the arcades there, and was like, what is this game? It looks incredible and it plays amazing. And I was like, this is that bullet hell that people have been like talking about, and I've observed through osmosis, and that also sent me on another path of me. So on that same trip, yeah, it's true. I bought that, and I bought Devil's Crush. So yeah, that was I guess the genesis there of Demon's Tilt. But
Yeah. What a
anyways,
great marriage, basically.
yeah, and I can talk about like how I started piecing together that relationship of
I did have a few follow-up questions about dev history before going on directly
oh
to
yeah,
Demon Tilt.
let me kind of wrap up the long story here about me getting into development. So it was a lot of prototypes, and I was building like a local co-op game on my own based on like it was Windjammers. Do you know
Yes,
that
yes.
title?
People love
And
Windjammers. Yeah.
okay, yeah, I'm a huge Neo Geo fan. Like I was also collecting Neo Geo starting in like 2006 for MVS, not AES. I don't have money like
Who does?
that. So MVS was very affordable.
Yeah.
Like it was like people were giving it away on eBay
Yeah. Were
practically.
you
Like
importing from Mexico?
I don't think
Oh.
so. I basically had a rule like I wouldn't pay more. I would try not to pay more than $100 per cartridge. So I'm sure there's bootlegs in my collection. Anyway,
Oh no.
big Neo Geo fan from being a kid, and Metal Slug. If you want to talk, if you count that as a shmup, Metal Slug, huge fan.
I'm a big Metal Slug fan too.
Yeah, run and gun. Yeah, just incredible. Okay, so yeah, I was making this like Windjammers with Uzis. It was called Gunjammers, and then it was called Trap Gods, and it was just basically Pong with fighting game mechanics in it. And this was all done through visual scripting. The impressive thing was I was able to show this prototype off, and people would like they didn't care how I made it; they just cared how it played.
Definitely.
And so when I started, I needed playtesters because I was like trying to make a co-op, not a co-op, a versus local fighting game without anyone. And so I'm like holding two controllers in each hand, trying to like play against myself. Like I didn't have the means to write like an AI or anything.
That is so
And so
hard
I'm
in
like,
fighting games.
it was driving me. It was completely just a maddening exercise. So I found like a game group, like a board gaming group, and I like bought it there, like a local one in Providence, and like it's all like Settlers of Catan players, and like two guys maybe tried it, and they're like, "This is okay, but it's terrible." I was like, "Oh." So then, so then what ended up happening is I found out that Rhode Island has its own local indie game dev scene. It's very small. It's Games Developers Association of Rhode Island, where there was actually people that there was like business talks and stuff, and so people were showing off prototypes, and that helped a lot. And now I had suddenly perspective on like what I was doing, and so there I met a guy, Trevor, who was an ex Sega guy who worked on a lot of Dreamcast era stuff, and he had a mobile game prototype that he was working on. And so he's like, do you want to, work together on this prototype? And I said, sure, like, let's try it out. So we spent a couple of months, like maybe up to like 9 months on it. And he basically like was open to anything I had to say about the design of it. I mean, we took it to a logical conclusion where we were able to pitch it to publishers, and he had those connections. And he pitched it, and it just didn't get traction. It was a very free to play concept, but he basically let me have free reign over design of all of it. I don't think a lot of people would just let you do that.
I don't think so.
I think most people would like, part of their ego would be in the way about, oh, actually, I've done this before, and this is how it's done. So pretty much anything I wanted to try, he was willing to at least give it a go. And so then Pokemon Go came out, and nobody cared about anything that had to do with free to play. Like no one wanted, and so we had to shelve it for that time. And at the same time, this was 2015. I was still talking to Ralph at the time, and I think I had told him, "Hey, do you want to work on this thing?" And he didn't say yes or no. He said it sounds cool, and so with encouragement, I just started working on Demon's Tilt on my own, and it was like this side project that kind of filled, a lot of my time. I was still juggling stuff from Hasbro and just anywhere I could get work. But then Demon still started to take over until I keep showing Ralph this thing, and I'm like, oh, I'm having problems with this. I don't know if it's gonna be like, am I gonna do an itch.io release or what? And eventually he's just like, listen, I want to publish it, and let's just wrap this thing up. And that's when he came in this year, and just like the productivity has taken off to where we were on Steam within a week. He was getting me hooked up with everything that I had problems with. Like I'm great at the moment to moment design, but for scaling things, I need help from a technical person to help me, scale those systems and make sure that they're recyclable and technically sound.
Yeah.
And then I can just focus on the art and that moment to moment feeling. Yeah. So I guess that's how I arrived. That's a very long way of saying how I arrived. Hopefully it doesn't come off as one big long rant.
No way. I think, what's funny is as popular as indie development has gotten, where, a lot of people say, oh, there's indie developers here, there, and everywhere, you never really hear their stories that often of how they ended up becoming indie developers, what the road there is like. And I've personally always been curious to hear other people's experiences with it. I mean, obviously, you've gone to a professional level, and in the past, I've done some, like, I don't know what you call it, like homebrew indie development or whatever. Like, I've noticed that a lot of really successful indie devs seem to have a background in art and visual design, which makes sense. And then for me, I had a background in the technical aspects, like the coding, the programming.
Okay.
But I can't draw worth shit. I can't do any visual. I can animate existing assets, okay, but so all my projects have been me like sprite ripping things or trying to, because I'm like, I need an artist.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
I think on my as I got deeper into it, and my appreciation for design started to eclipse what I love about painting or digital painting, which I still love and stuff. But then I think the design part, I guess. Well, hold on. Let me take it back a second to what you were saying, to relate it better. But yeah, I actually thought that you had to, if you didn't have that programming background, you had no right over the design portion.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like you're not allowed to author this side of it if you don't have a deep understanding of how it's made. And so that was like a mental division in my mind until I was given the democratized tools, right?
Yeah.
That allowed me to attack the problem. And the way I've put it is designer, I need to represent the human, the player, right?
Yep.
Or the user or the consumer, and then your kind of your engineer or your more technically minded person needs to best represent the machine. So they want to make sure one works, but that it's effective. Like you're not hogging resources. You're just doing things right.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna meet in the middle, hopefully. And so you can kind of approach it from two different ways. And so yeah, I think it's incredible when you have the one guy who can do everything really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes you just have to look for the kind of skill sets that can help each other out.
Absolutely. That it's just funny you're talking about building a balanced team, and if you had two people who were really strong visual designers but didn't have a whole lot of
Yeah.
experience with coding and stuff. You have a
It would
bitchin' looking
be
game, but it might take a while to get running.
it would be the most beautiful mess you've
Yeah.
ever seen.
Or you get a bunch of people like me together where the game's optimized, it runs really well, but it looks like shit. So you need that balance for sure.
Yeah.
So it sounds like from your story that your main inspiration for Demon's Tilt was the game Devil's Crush on the TurboGrafx? Or do you have a kind of longer history with pinball beyond just Devil's Crush?
Yeah, so pinball, I started to get a bit more obsessive. Like I'm part of like I guess the next wave of people to like appreciate the pinball like boom, I guess, the second wave of the post 90s, right?
Yeah,
So I guess we're like in the third wave of it. And that's I guess thanks in part to pinball simulation like Pinball Arcade and Zen. And then also just like there's a place in it's pretty far in New Hampshire, Pinball Wizard Arcade, which I took trips up to, and then like I got involved in like the local Rhode Island Pinball League, played a season there, and then suddenly, we started getting pinball bars and pinball arcades, physical ones in our town. Like we have three now, which
nice.
is crazy.
Yeah, it's making a comeback for sure.
Yeah, and so just being able to, I don't know, like to be able to enjoy the game almost fresh, like and enjoy it with the new kind of community has just been awesome. It's like not fair. Like we get to discover something new for the first time.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at with physical pinball now is, on the weekend going and being able to play and then in experience with league and stuff. And I think as I was getting more into the indie, that must have been why I wanted to do also push me to do Demon's Tilt so much is that I started to become obsessed with this concept of pure gameplay. I was like Googling, like, why do people like shmups? This was like years and years ago.
Nice.
Like, before I understood, like, what, like, you always hear about cave and cave and cave and cave. And I'm like, what is this cave? Like, what is it? Like, what is this? And I heard people say, oh, it's pure gameplay. What does that mean? Like, what is pure gameplay? And it just means like, yeah, it's like simple mechanical beauty. Like, it's just also like refined to where if you think about Cave, what they did with shooting games, like aiming was a big deal. Like actually plinking and aiming was like a skill you wanted to master. And I think they recognized that no one really cares about aiming so much. So you then had like your bullet patterns like filled up half the screen to where it wasn't so much about aiming, but it's like it became more about like risk reward and getting in the face of the bosses and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So they were like stripping back all the elements to what it's like. It's just dodging and scoring. And so that pure gameplay thing, I started to like obsess about and like started to I don't know look for games with. And then my favorite games are all games that are just mechanically sound, like Tetris and SimCity and Diablo 2.
Oh yeah, excellent games. And I think as the Cave fanboy as I am, I think what appeals to Cave specifically to me is that they took what worked in the gameplay of shmups, what was fun, what was exciting, and they basically just turned that on overdrive, where they said, okay, we're gonna take what we think is the fun aspect of shmups, which is space control, dodging, shooting, and we're just gonna turn that up to the next level to where it's not more complicated, but it's more intense, where every second matters. You're not floating around. It's just compounded on top of each other. So it increases the intensity. And if you go from playing a lot of those style of games and then you start to play even more modern style games where there's a lot of downtime, a lot of sitting around, then I think
Mm.
that's where you see the division in the game design and why certain people are so in love with shmups is because it's an intensity that's hard to find in other video game genres for sure.
Yeah, and I just think, I mean, Death Smiles and Mushihime and Dodonpachi, I think when I was over there, I was trying to, those were the ones I was like, it was so clear what makes them different. Like, I had played like Einhander and Ikaruga,
Hmm.
but then I remember playing, I think, Gigawing and instantly recognizing that there's something different about this. And I don't know if it was just that it was flashier, but it just like I started to like that style
Yeah,
more,
Giga
where
Wing's
it's
a great
just
game.
yeah, it's more like more explosions, like more turned up
Yes.
and maybe easier. Like the difficulty part, like I think Ushihime, I don't think it's I know it's difficult, but I know there's a way to play it if you're just feeding it quarters that of course is gonna make it easier, but it's just fun to cruise through. Like
Right.
and it's just very enjoyable.
So now that we've talked about the history of Demon's Tilt and kind of the story leading up to it, I really want to dig into the game because,
Sure.
yeah, because when for the listeners out there, I was able to get access to the beta and play it. And at first I was thinking, okay, like before I ever played Demon's Tilt, ever heard about it or anything, I just heard it's an indie pinball game. And I thought, I like pinball games quite a bit. I probably could give a lot of feedback on how to improve this game. I could probably like really help this dev and just tell him, all the things that could be improved. And then I fire up Demon's Tail and I was like, holy this is a good game. Like
Thanks.
this game is hella legit. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the podcast, because I wouldn't. That wasn't true. This
Yeah,
game is hella
thanks.
legit.
It actually means a lot to appeal to the niche. Like I want those cult audiences. Like I want to undergrade about what they like and emulate that and have it be authentic, hopefully.
Yeah,
So I'm
well,
glad it
it's
made a good impression and it feels hardcore. Like that's good to hear.
yeah,
um,
definitely. And so I guess I could talk about what parts of the game that really stood out to me as
sure.
being standout features for the people listening for sure. I think
Yeah,
first of
let me
all,
know because I hardly feedback yet. So it's actually my first time hearing
oh cool.
raw impressions really of the
Oh,
game.
sweet. And I don't know if my podcast listeners kind of know that I can be kind of a tough critic at time too. So if you win me over, I feel like you're gonna win over a lot of people because
Yeah, sure. I
yeah,
mean, I'll take any criticism. Like right now, like we're looking to basically refine the rules
right,
to make it the best possible version of the game. Like it's not going to be explicit, but you know how in Cave World things roll out and then there's rolling changes to the ROM and then there's the final black label or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
So that's how we're kind of, in my mind, I'm structuring it as like we're going to put it out there. It's going to go into early access, and hopefully it'll be refined to that definitive version.
right. The first thing that I think everyone will of course notice is the excellent visuals of this game. This is a beautiful game. If you like sprite art, I know these days, indie games kind of get a reputation for, oh, they're all sprite art, they're all kind of trying to be retro, but what's unique about Demon's Tilt sprite art is that it doesn't remind you of the NES. It reminds you of, to me, the Neo Geo. It looks like a Neo Geo game almost, or like TurboGrafx, which makes sense. The
Yeah.
sprite art in the game is very
Thanks.
beautiful and very detailed. It isn't just, 8-bitty. There's a lot to it. Definitely wows you the second you launch it.
Yeah, for the sprites, I wasn't gonna commit to like a tile size or because I don't have to. Like
Yeah,
Unity as an engine is really a 3D engine, and you're putting on 2D constraints to make it a 2D game. So there are artificial constraints to like the visual and the sound design, but for the visuals, like some sprites are actually like painted, pretty large and shrunk down. Some are painted small and then blown up. It has to match the gameplay first, so
hmm,
kind of roughen the art and then prototype the gameplay and then do a cleanup pass and add animation to it. So thanks. Yeah, the visual is, well, for me, a big part because I'm a visual
yes,
artist. But
yes. It definitely shows that well-seasoned developer, like, I even am thinking of some of the more recent, what would you call them, like, not triple A, but the more premier type of 2D games that come out, like Mega Man
yeah,
11, for instance.
you're starting to see. yeah, then crank the fidelity up.
Yeah. Like when I look at that visual design and I look at Demon's Tilt, I actually like Demon's Tilt a lot more because it feels more, I don't know, it feels more, has more character. It feels more painted, more, whereas a lot of the newer 2D style games coming out, they're 2D, yes, but it doesn't have that magic that the Neo Geo games had. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but looks great.
Yeah, I think well, definitely Neo Geo and like a almost PlayStation or Saturn quality of sprite work is what I wanted to go for. So like sprite scaling and
Mm-hmm. Yes.
not really limiting myself with the color palette. Like the color palette is like kind of restricted, but then sometimes I'm just like, eh.
Let it rock, dude.
Yeah, and I think really like if you really dig into the development of those games like Nazca with Metal Slug, I'm gonna take a guess here, but it's not like how as developers now when we're trying to quote the past, like
Right.
we'll find the color palette that they like. I know that they were scanning in artwork and trying to like make it look as good as possible with
Mm-hmm.
whatever by any means that they could. So if they had access to Photoshop, they're going to use filters and tricks and just whatever works to just bring up the because they're always trying to like they were never working with those parameters with like pleasure. Like they were always trying to push it.
Yeah.
So I feel like in that spirit, we should try and just kind of push the
Right.
fidelity and just like
Yeah, I agree. And for me, putting nostalgia aside, I think there are plenty of games that do a great job kind of emulating what the SNES looked like, emulating what the NES looked like. But I feel like what's missing in the world is more games that look like Symphony of the Night, more games that look like,
yeah
Dodonpachi or DOJ, like that beautiful, gorgeous sprite art where they're pushing that hardware as far as they could push it and really pushing
yeah
sprite work as far as they could push it.
yeah. And I think in this case where this game is not like as large as Symphony of the Night.
Right.
So I guess I'm trying to think like economically, how far do I think I can push this
Hmm.
and still be able to finish this
Yeah, no
within
kidding.
a reasonable amount. And so I'm like, okay, I've been doing this professionally for this many years. I know how real, like I've shown you my work on my website.
Yep.
I know how realistic I can go. So then now I know safely how far I can push it and still have a economical kind of art style, I guess, like the execution of it. So
Yeah, it really comes across well, and not just with the, I guess, modeling or however you'd say it, but also with the effects too. Like when you're hitting the bullets or when you're hitting all the different. I don't know the pinball term, sorry, but like when you're hitting the bonus things or the
yeah,
special
like the targets or
targets, yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of nice visual nuances there too that make the game feel alive and make the game feel polished and finished. When I was playing, it's a beta, and I know there's more things to work out, but when I was playing the beta, it didn't feel like a lot of betas when you play them. It felt like, wow, this game's close to being done. I don't know if it is, but it feels like, yeah, this thing's close.
Yeah, it's pretty close, and I think we're nearly feature complete. I mean, again, the scope of the game is very reined in on purpose,
Hmm.
and so like I think for my own sanity, I need to see where this ends. So
Yes.
I'm gonna pick my projects with like a goal in mind that I'm not trying to make the next amazing roguelike or epic. So it's just something very very reined in, complete, and then see how far I can push it. So
Yeah, and I think shmup fans can definitely appreciate that because, personally speaking, my favorite shmups are not the long ones. It's the ones that feel like they're not wasting your time, they're finished. Every second of gameplay matters, there's depth to them. As I was playing Demon's Tilt, I definitely felt that way as I was playing, and I really got engrossed into it for sure. And I was trying to figure out, I'm not super good at pinball games, so I was trying to figure out how to do the tilting system and stuff, which we'll talk about later, like how to
sure, yeah.
make that work correctly. And so I guess another gameplay feature that I think will stand out for shmup players definitely is the tier system you included in the on the board. It's not just a board with flippers at the bottom. There's like 3 levels to the board, right?
Hmm. Sure.
Yeah, there's the top. I'm guessing is where you can really rack up your score, and that's where the boss fights are, right?
The top level has the Manticore Chimera creature,
Mm-hmm.
and it's where you access the the game's main 3-ball multi-ball.
Yes.
As far as the tiers go, this is me kind of paying homage to Crush in that they also have this tiered stack of a vertical thing.
Hmm.
The thing about it is though it can make it so that way I had to balance it such that the player can still die, because if you can only die at the bottom tier, it can become really easy to stay up on the top ones. And so yeah, I do things where like the flipper separation, that gap widens as it goes up
Hmm.
to kind of keep pushing the player down. Yeah, you definitely can score the most as you work your way up. But I guess once you start going for score, you're going to realize that, like for instance, like the way to increase your base multipliers can only be done on the first tier.
Oh, okay.
So there's like an anvil there where you can spend kind of material that you've earned to increase your base multiplier, but it's can only be done in the most dangerous area, right?
Yeah.
So there's things like that. Yeah, just for balance. But
And earlier you mentioned how the scoring system is very similar to, a cave style scoring system. So I guess what I'll do is I'll talk about some cave scoring mechanics, then you can tell me what you think, like which ones kind of fit in with Demon's Tilt. So the first one, of course, I'm thinking of Dodonpachi, is there's chaining, where you have this meter, and if you're able to string along your kills correctly, you're able to keep that chain going, and that increases your multiplier, I guess what you'd call it, your chaining, and that
mhm.
massively boosts your score like crazy high. And
Yes.
one small mistake drops your chain. Is there any kind of chaining type of thing in this game?
So there is a chain. There is chains in Demon's Tilt. The reason is a little different, I guess. But anything that scores will build up chain. And the reason to keep this combo going, like in normal pinball, it's very risk versus reward. And every time you flip, the big meta of physical pinball is control. So being in control of the situation, not just flipping randomly. So you're cradling the ball a lot, and
Hmm.
you're taking accurate shots on shots that score the most for where you are at that moment. So the flashing shots, those are the ones you want to hit. You want to do it when it's safe, so they'll suss out when something is safe or not. So you end up with holding the ball on the flippers a lot to regain control, which is kind of kills the pacing, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I mean, people are going to hate me for being impure, but for video pinball, to break the rules, I want to encourage people to keep the ball moving. And so having a chain system encourages them to keep the ball in play and not to cradle often. Like you're going to want to cradle to regain control, but there's a window there where you're allowed to cradle, and then you want to send it back to keep that chain up. And the reason you want to keep it up is I do take child score. There's a child score mechanic. I forget which game has it. I think a lot of them have it, but basically your chain meter will be racking up its own score as it ticks up using your base multiplier. So you always want to keep that thing going because you're basically earning double points by having it up.
Yeah, and like I said, my pinball experience isn't super strong, but I have seen, like, I've sat down and played a pinball, and then I've seen a better player come along, and yeah, there's been times where the dude's just cradling the ball all day long.
Yeah.
You're like, is this how you're really supposed to play these games? This seems kind of whack.
Yeah.
So I do like how your game's like, no, 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 no. You got to hit the ball. It tests
Yeah.
your reflexes more and tests your improvisation more.
I think it's designed to reward you for just what I enjoy. Like, I don't think anyone would argue with me if I said that trying to hold a ball, don't tell me that in multi ball, holding a ball on a flipper is more fun than just flipping all the balls around. It's not true. It can't be true. So, if you've seen like a really great player, what they do in multi ball is they'll cradle two balls on the flipper and just flip with one ball and try and keep that going as long as possible. I guess it's fun, but obviously you're breaking what the designer intended you to do, which is fine. But I say, well, we put a lot of effort into multi-ball, so I want you to be flipping around.
Yeah, and it's just more exciting too to see. I guess I know this is a casual pinball player, but there's this one pinball machine my friend was showing me. I can't remember which one, but the multi-ball in it is nut balls. It's like 8 or 9 balls coming down, and he's just like just smacking them all over the place.
Yeah, I think Apollo 13
That's
has
it. It's Apollo 13.
13,
That was
13
it.
balls in play. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, people use multi-ball as their kind of short-term goal. I need to get to multi-ball, and then the game can loop itself, but that is their immediate goal. So of course we want to have that in here. So actually getting multi-ball working in a 2D game has become challenging. But it's in there. It's not just on like bonus stages or something. It's really at any time I can add a ball into play and have a multi-ball going. So
Yeah.
proud of that.
Yeah, and I got a few situations of playing multi-ball, and it was really exciting. And so I also wanted to ask you about how the boss battles work in Demon's Tilt.
Sure. So the bosses right now in the beta you played, there's 3 mini bosses, and then on tier 2 and 3, there is like kind of bosses that are fixtures of the table. So you have the high priestess in the center of the table, and she like controls this pachinko machine that's nested behind her. And then on the top is the lion chimera who kind of controls the multi-ball. But then on tier 1 is where you have kind of boss challenges that spawn in, and that will be where you can challenge what I'm just calling a boss loop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think right now there's 3, and we're planning for 5.
Oh, nice.
And then there's going to be some kind of interstitial challenge that happens, like brick breaking or these kind of one-off toys on the playfield that will spawn in and out on rotation. And then these bosses, the ones that you can kill, will respawn with a different behavior and an increased difficulty as you complete the boss loop over and over again. So that's how we're handling it.
And what are the bosses' effect on your score? I'm assuming it skyrockets it, but how does that work exactly?
Yeah, they have a set value that is higher than most of the things that score on the playfield. So the way I'm doing scoring as of now is I think there's a threshold of anything over 10,000 counts as a jackpot, even though the game might not explicitly tell you it's a jackpot. And the reason it's designated as a jackpot is so I can have jackpot multipliers, which only affect high scoring things. So there's going to be 3 multipliers in it. Sounds complicated, but you don't have to worry about it. There's the base multiplier, which affects everything that comes through, your jackpot multiplier, which only affects big numbers, and then your gold multiplier, which is earned after completing nearly all of the tasks on the board before the game loops over. Like if you know what a loop is.
Yeah.
Shmup.
Absolutely.
So palette change, loops over, and then now everything scores globally twice as much.
How many loops are available on the board right now?
So it's going to scale. So the whole game, just like normal pinball, it just loops infinitely. And I think when the player sees, I guess what you'd call like all of the content is about the time that it's going to loop over itself. And there is a hidden secret for players that are able to reach that final something. I'm not going to say what yet. But not many people are going to see this in normal play. There might be a hint of it, maybe somehow, but that will be gated off like what's called a wizard mode. So you need to complete all of these tasks.
Nice. It's like the loops in Ketsui. You got to get the right requirements to hit the secret loop.
the real boss.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to have something like that.
Nice. Anyway, so you were talking about the hidden final boss. That's a really cool idea. I mean, I don't know what that is, but what are some other mechanics of Demon's Tilt that are very unique to this game that you're not going to find in other pinball games?
Okay, so the pink bullets thing, if you've been playing, there's a mechanic called Gold Rush, which is directly inspired by like Dodonpachi metal. The game is you're not dodging pink bullets with your pinball in this, because that would be horrible. That would be so awful.
That would be crazy.
If you could die from bullets. I don't even think I attempted to do that. Actually, I could talk about mechanics I've tried to do that just didn't work out.
Yeah, definitely.
But, so I'll talk about that after. But so basically like when you're spawning pink bullets to farm metals from. So pink bullets are designed to impede the flow of the table. So you can't when you hit them, they break, but you're going to lose momentum on the ball because they don't pass through the ball. So any of the squishy monsters, you pass right through it. Those are fine. Pink bullets will impede your progress. And so this magic system, there's something called conversion, where you can transform them into green bullets, which will seek out all the fleshy monsters on the screen and destroy them. Or you can turn pink bullets into gold medals, which is stored for a jackpot, an ultra
Nice.
jackpot.
Kind of like Hyper.
So I don't think I've played that one.
Oh, it's a in DOJ. There's a Hyper mechanic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, kind of like what you're
Yeah,
saying
so
there.
so you're storing. Yeah, the idea here is you store by storing points with this banking system. You basically are going to have them so you could roll over to the next ball, and they're just living in that bank to be claimed as an ultra jackpot. So you want to build up a nice jackpot, and then you want to build up a huge multiplier, and then a huge jackpot multiplier, and then cash out.
Right.
So
That's
the
cool.
longer you wait to cash out that ultra jackpot at the lion, bigger points, and like we're like talking like a quarter of your score, doubling your score. Like it's big.
That's a cool concept because it adds that risk reward where you're like, okay, do I cash out now or do I keep
Yeah,
going and keep building and then you lose your ball and you're like,
yeah. The penalty for dying is it used to be that you were robbed of all your multipliers. So now it has it so that way certain multipliers that you've earned through completing rituals, meaning specific tasks on the board, you keep those multipliers. But then a lot of the multipliers that you just earned on that ball, a lot of them are cashed out for a
oh,
flat
okay.
bonus.
Well, that's good. That's good. That might bring down the frustration factors because some shmups, Dodonpachi, the one I'm playing right now, it's like you bomb and you lose half your score. So it's like
Yeah,
holy shitballs. So yeah, that's a good idea.
they treat yeah. I see. I tried to incorporate a bombing mechanic into the game, and it ended up turning into Gold Rush,
Oh,
where
okay.
you're. I mean, you've seen it. If you oh
Yes.
wait, do I have the Gold Rush call out? Does she say it? I don't know if she says it in the
I
version
don't
you're
think
playing.
I've heard anyone say Gold Rush.
Okay, so there's the new beta is going to roll out, and you'll be able to play it maybe next week. But there's new callouts in it, and there's more communicating to the player what's going on. So yeah, I had at one time like the ability to like drop your combo for bombing everything on the screen, but you had to be cradled and you had to like tilt down, and then I was gonna have to tutorialize the player on like,
Uh-huh.
oh, you got to cradle and you have to down tilt. Like it was just too heavy. Like so why not like all of the mechanics need to naturally occur as you're playing. So
Yeah.
now pink bullets have a luck percentage of spawning as gold, and so as spawning as a gold bullet. So you snipe these gold bullets, and you'll activate Gold Rush, and you'll transform everything pink to metals, and that's just going to naturally happen as the player's playing. So that's good to me.
Yeah.
That's better. That's more of a win than trying to tutorialize them on something. And if someone never learns that mechanic, they've shut themselves off to something that unless they explicitly seek out like how to do this, they're never going to experience it. So
As a shmup player at least, I don't know about pinball players, but as a shmup player, I know I'm pretty bad about following tutorials or listening to the game for more than 10 seconds at a time. I could see someone like myself playing the game for a long time before figuring out that mechanic. So, yeah, maybe that was a good thinking.
yeah, it's just not fair to the player, and it's not. I guess it's not true to pinball, which kind of presents itself as it is. There's not much of a tutorialization going on. It's trial by fire. Like you just approach the machine and
Yeah, as pinball machines are. So, my next question about Demon's Tilt is I was wondering if you can explain to not only myself but the listeners how the tilting system works and kind of the way a player can exploit it but not break it, I guess, or not get a tilt.
okay. So it's something that hasn't been tutorialized yet in the game, and it's unfortunate for the people who are beta testing it because I have to like explicitly tell them in chat you must you're going to be tutorialized on this. So I'm just explaining the mechanic to you like you learned it.
Sure.
So that will be maybe one of the only things that's going to be tutorialized. That and maybe cradling as a basic flipper skill.
Yeah.
And so the way tilting works is like in real pinball, where physical pinball, nudging the machine is part of the game. people, if you're an outsider looking in, you might go, "Oh, that's cheating." But I mean, in league play, like people were getting away whatever they can get away with on the machine that skirted the tilt, they would do. Like you're
Yeah.
moving the machine like 2 inches over if you can.
Oh, wow.
Whatever. And if you know how it physically works, I'll explain it. There's a physical tilt bob
Yes.
inside the machine that is it's metal and it's hitting a circle and creating a circuit, closing a circuit or whatever, and it's causing you to tilt. And so you get 3 warnings, and then you're going to tilt out. The game shuts down, and your ball drains. So in Demon's Tilt, there is in the right corner a tilt bob, and if he touches the spikes on the side, you'll be issued a warning, and you'll tilt out. Now for beta right now, it's very generous. Like you're not really going to tilt out if you're trying because I don't want to color the beta impressions with negative reinforcement just yet
Right.
because I think it would be too frustrating because we're getting a whole range of people trying the game out. So you can get away with murder for now on the game, but I think it's going to be pretty generous. And you'll only have to let it cool down every once in a while after some really aggressive like hammering away at it. But if you're wondering if mechanically does tilting get you extra points, no, it doesn't. It's just there to guide the ball in the direction you want and to help you save it from draining. So right now I've experimented with like tilting can cause like you to score double on that hit, but it just never panned out to be anything that
Yeah.
or was fun.
Just to learn more about the tilting mechanic in the game. So it's depending on your setup, it can be mapped to either some keyboard keys or like an analog stick. So are you able to tilt left, right, down, and up, or what directions can you fully tilt?
So the inputs are digital and they're based on WASD. So if you use an analog stick, it's not going to be give you analog control.
Sure, yeah,
Something we'd have to experiment with, but we can't really give you something that give you any kind of advantage that someone playing with WASD would get.
right.
So it feels fine with an analog stick, but it's not 8 ways. It's just 4 ways. And yeah, for me, the ideal setup is WASD with the shift keys for the flippers. The controls are in the, you can experiment with the controls. It's already set
Yes,
up. You
yeah,
can try a control pad. I know you have an arcade stick that you wanted to try out.
yep.
Um,
I was thinking of mapping the tilt to the arcade stick and then using the left and right for the flippers.
yeah, I have some sticks here, and I'm like I don't know if I could make this work.
So,
I think I could make it work if you're like if you think of a Neo Geo pan ABCD, your thumbs would be on, or you're using A and D, and then like with your pinky, you're like hitting the joystick. It would be pretty absurd. I don't know.
so I guess because I was having a little bit of trouble understanding how the mechanic works on the nitty gritty details. So let's say the ball, I understand tilting, but let's say the ball is, do you feel like you need to tilt the ball a bunch? If you hammer, like you want to tilt right, if you hammer the D button and you're trying to tilt right,
Mm.
will that increase your tilt or is it like it's a set input? Do you know what I mean?
Well, there is a window that you can nudge. I mean, we're saying tilt and nudge.
Nudge, sorry, yeah.
I know it's I use it interchangeably by accident all the time. But when you nudge, there's a window that before you can nudge again to prevent you from saving every ball possible. So there
Okay,
is some timing involved.
okay,
And then there is a hidden, not hidden, it's exposed to the player, but the tilt bob will fill up with red and let you know when you're in that aggressive zone. So it's a meter, right?
yeah,
So if you do it before that meter cools down, it's going to count as a more aggressive force applied to the tilt bob itself. Like
okay,
mechanically, you're not actually moving the entire table. I mean, behind the scenes, like you're moving the ball, which is functionally the same thing. You're moving the ball, and then there's a cooldown and a meter associated with it that will determine the severity of like what you just did.
right.
And yeah, it has to do with that cooldown window.
Okay, so yeah, let's say you're trying to nudge the ball to save it and your timing is just really bad. You can't just rely on mashing tilts. You have to time your tilts because there's a cooldown window.
Yeah, there's a window, and there's just times that that you'd want to do that. And then mechanically, the way you would tilt out is, let's say you're in that hot zone on the meter, and you hit tilt, you're gonna and it happens to be that tilt bob is hitting those spikes. When those all align, then you're going to tilt out, which is a really severe penalty. So I want to make sure that you've done something
You got a little,
aggressively
yeah,
bad. Yeah.
you got degenerate with that feature for sure.
Yeah, you've earned the punishment that is coming to you. So
Well, yeah, and I think I remember when I was playing the game, I was thinking about some of the tables I've played in my life to try and compare, to Demon's Tilt. And one thing I did like a lot about the board is the board feels like it's wanting you to keep playing. Where there's some pinball machines I've played before, they have these really random gutters or really random draining points for your ball. And Demon's Tilt, I don't think has any of that. I feel like if you're skilled enough, the game will let you play it. It's not going to randomly gutter your ball on you or anything.
it tries to be friendly in that regards. Like you want it to have a magnetic quality,
Hmm.
and so if that first impression on the player is too severe, they're not going to keep playing it.
Yeah.
They're not going to be interested in returning. We're doing things kind of behind the scenes to self balance, and then no, I'm wondering if I should talk about the kind of I don't think it's necessary the self balancing features like
Oh, okay. I don't know. It sounds pretty interesting to me. What is the self balancing feature?
to kind of engage like a newer player. We're starting to get feedback from beta testing about what a median score would be.
Hmm.
A median score for a new player. So as if you're under that score, the game is going to just give you a few freebies to help you along. So it might give you it'll be a little maybe more generous with the kickbacks, or it's going to send you to tier 3 instead of tier 2 on your ball launch.
Hmm.
And then once you cross that very modest threshold, and we think that by then the player will have been tutorialized or they would have gotten lucky, then those features just turn themselves off.
That's really cool. That's like a rank system in shmups. If you're familiar with ranking systems, where basically to balance the games. I mean, it's interesting what people think about ranking systems, but
Hmm.
let's say you're an expert player in DOJ and you're
Mm-hmm.
racking up these insanely high chains and scores and you're using all these hypers. The game knows that and it starts to increase the difficulty of the game as your score increases. And
Hmm.
so it sounds like this is a kind of like that, but not nearly as drastic.
Yeah, it's just going in the other way where it's just it's trying to make a good impression on a first time player because it can be the negative reinforcement can be just a little too severe for some people. Like if they're not getting anything out of it, they don't. I guess I recognize that in real pinball, trying to introduce the game to a lot of different people. And I think if you don't introduce them to an easy table first, or you try to introduce a friend to too many mechanics at once, they're not going to enjoy themselves and they're not going to keep playing. So
Yeah, that's definitely some wise thinking there.
yeah, and I think that's why certain shmups, I guess, are better recommends for first time players, or that just make a good impression on first time players.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right about that. So we've talked about the gameplay, we've talked about the visuals, but of course there's another aspect of the game we got to talk about, which is the sound design and the soundtrack. So can you kind of tell me the history of that?
The composer is a guy Charlie. He has the handle EC2151, and I kind of when it was just me, kind of commissioned him pretty early on to do the table theme,
Mm-hmm.
and I commissioned him because he was working in the sound like a Mega Drive Sega Genesis sound, and I wanted this like FM sound, this Genesis sound. Like I kind of knew right away I wanted this sound, even though it's I don't know. I guess maybe it doesn't match the visuals, or it kind of matches the visuals.
It works. It definitely works, I think.
To me, I wanted something that's chip, but not like abrasive,
Uh-huh.
and also for like my own enjoyment, like as someone who sometimes makes music and stuff, like I mess around with Game Boy music and NES music and stuff. So the sound to my ear just wasn't that pleasant. And then so this to me, like being like a NES kid, like the Genesis sound was something to me that's like exotic. So it was like really for me. Just
Yeah.
I thought it's cool, and he's like worked on I think 7 tracks now, and I couldn't be happier with the work he's doing. And then we also have another guy, Hal, who just started helping me with the sound portion, the sound effects.
Yeah.
Um, and so he's actually doing genuine FM synthesis sound effects, which I had to just to tempt things in, use stuff that I'm taking from other games, but for a commercial product, we can't do that.
Yep.
And so his knowledge of FM synthesis, he's able to get a very genuine sound there, and it's a job in itself. Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
difficult.
Sound effects are hard,
Yeah,
and they make or break your game.
and the way that he's working, where I'm very into very particulars. Like I've already done animations to certain rhythms of sounds, and now he has to match that. It's kind of amazing that he's able to do
Yeah.
that.
Though it might make it a little
um,
easier for him too, though, because there's like a structure he can go for.
yeah, yeah, he's been able to nail it, and also the other component of the sound is like real samples, so it's not just all synthesis. There's very like kung fu anime sounds to the game,
Hmm.
and so he helped flesh out that language also. And then we have the voice actress Christina, recorded like 60 to 100 lines.
Nice.
Not all of them have made it into the game, but I thought it's important to have the central character, Lilith, the high priestess character. She guides the player, taunts the player, and provides like positive reinforcement for them. And it gives away little narrative
Uh-huh.
hints, some kind of story which may or may not exist. So yeah, there's that part, which is also a part of like the magnetic quality of like pinball, is that announcer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the announcer yelling at you as you play. There's
Yeah,
nothing.
or
It's
call
you
outs.
got to have that. Some of the great. Yeah, I can't remember some of the really funny sound bites some of those pinball machines had, but they definitely add to the experience. It feels like you're
Yeah,
playing and your friends like cheering you on or yelling at you as you play.
yeah. There's some good like movie tie-in ones.
Yes, yeah. Oh, the
Um,
Terminator.
yeah,
So overall, in your process of creating Demon's Tilt, from conception to where it is now, what did you think was the greatest struggle as the dev?
yeah. Worrying about if it's fun and like self-doubting, but now the initial feedback has been very encouraging. So getting it out, and well, does anyone care about a title so niche?
Oh, I
Uh,
know.
turns out
I know
turns
that
out they
feeling.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was another worry, and then of course this marketing part of it is extremely difficult, like having people hear about it. So that's become like another job itself.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. Just, I mean, a podcast is me sitting and talking, just networking and getting
Yeah,
people to know about the podcast, trying to get the word out there. That is like 80% of what I do. And then the other 20% is actually recording and editing. It's crazy. Marketing is
yeah,
a whole nother beast. So, yeah, I definitely feel for you there.
yeah. But I think once you start getting that positive feedback from people, it encourages you to just, okay, this, wow, it actually worked.
Yeah.
Or they enjoyed this piece of content.
Yeah, I think as a game, definitely has everything. It checks all the boxes. It's just, like you said, it almost comes down to will people know about it or not? Because I felt that way about a lot of like Dojin and indie shmups too, where there's some really solid ones out there that are just excellent. And it's just a matter of getting the word out. So hopefully I
Yeah,
can
and I
help
think
whatever way I can because I think this game's really excellent. And I've already recommended my friends into pinball. I'm like, you need to get this game. It's a beast for sure.
nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're looking at how the shmup as like a, I guess, as a model for something so niche, but yet can still thrive and stay alive this long. So they must be doing something right. So doing things like going in and reading the community pages for other games
Hmm.
that we think have the same level of scope
Yeah.
and fidelity and art and music, and looking at the kind of feedback that they're getting, and making sure that we hit those expectations.
Yeah, and as a shmup player, I can definitely recommend Demon's Tilt because, like, I think there's a huge crossover. I don't know, but for me personally, there's a crossover between pinball and shmups. I love pinball, I love shmups, and there's times where I'm grinding out Dodonpachi runs. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fire up some Demon's Tilt here for a bit.
Nice. Yeah, it could be maybe less tense, or I don't know, more tense. I don't know. I think it should be more relaxing, hopefully, depending on your play style.
Or
But
just to even a nice breather from a shmup but
yeah,
it's the same style of gameplay, it's pick up and play. You're not sitting
yeah,
around in tutorials, you're not sitting around. You can just fire it up and play, which I think's always an excellent credit to a game.
yeah. That was I mean, it was planned that this is something that you can hop into and just enjoy a session, and then just hop back out. The funny thing is, as soon as Ralph got like pausing in, I started like pausing the game on the taskbar and coming back to it. which I had never done before. I'm like, this is convenient, and I like this a lot.
Yeah.
It actually started to change like how I was thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, before we wrap up, I guess, are there any other special things about Demon's Tilt that maybe, didn't cross my mind that are definitely important for the listeners to know?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd say is it's the release is sooner than later. Like you said, it's pretty far along. We have it up on Steam, so you can wishlist it. We want people to start getting involved. We have interest from streamers, we have interest from beta testers, and we just have people who are just following the release this. So we don't have a release date set yet, but I guess I could say that it's not 5 years out.
Nice. Well, awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. This was great. I'm glad to talk, not just like promoting, but being able to talk about design,
Yeah,
which I
definitely.
enjoy the most in art. And yeah, certainly I don't think too many interviews go that way. No one really wants to hear about mechanical depth of scoring or whatever, right?
No.
But
They'll
it seems like
probably,
this is the appropriate place for.
yeah, definitely. They'd probably talk about, I don't know what platform is it coming out on? What's the release date?
Yeah, price point, all
What's
this
the
stuff.
price
Yeah.
point? I don't care what the price point is. Buy the damn game, unless it's like $100 or something. But
No, it's definitely not.
I can go to sleep at night with that recommendation for sure. I feel good about it.